Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are stepping back into the world of Star Wars comics with a discussion of The High Republic Phase 3, Issues 1 through 4 by Cavan Scott. Before we do that, Jay, remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Absolutely. As always, we are very conveniently located on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy, and we are getting an opportunity to step back into the High Republic, which is one of our favorite things when it comes to Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
This will be a full spoiler discussion of the first 4 issues of the High Republic and Phase 3. But before we get into the story, I'll just go through some of the credits. Again, this was written by Cavan Scott. The artist and pencilers were Ario Anindito, Jim Toe, Marika Cresta. Inkers were Mark Morales, Ario Anindito, and Jim Toe again. Colorist was Jim Campbell. Letter was VC's Ariana Mayer. Covers by Phil Noto, the one and only Phil Noto. He does such great work.
Oh, yeah.
And the book design was by Carlos Lau. And on a note of that, I saw on social media that Ario Anindito is no longer doing High Republic comics. I'm not sure if he just...
No.
I think he may have gotten assigned to another project, but I can't remember if it was one of these issues or one of the subsequent ones where that concluded his work on the series. Now,
really?
Yeah, it's only an 8-issue series from what I've been seeing online. I'm not 100% sure that's correct because Phase 3 is going to go on for quite a while, but so we'll see what happens with that.
Oh, wow. He will be missed, though. I'll tell you what, he is one of the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's done some fantastic work. He's defined what Keeve Trennis looks like.
Yes.
And so, and Skier and some of the others. So, I hate to see him go, but hey, got to go where they tell you sometimes or take advantage of those other opportunities.
That's true.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, let's talk a bit about this series. So again, we're dealing with Phase 3. We're a year after the fall of Starlight Beacon. Keeve Trennis is a Jedi Master, and she is part of the fight against, well, surprisingly, the Hutts here. They have taken advantage of the Nile incursion into various portions of the galaxy to conquer some worlds of their own that were in the Republic, while the Republic is trying to fight a war on another front. So they're very much opportunists. Each one of these issues has a really neat way of starting, Jay, where Keeve is remembering something from her past where she had an interaction with Master Skier. And then like right after that, we get an analogous situation in the present. But it was kind of a neat way of remembering him in that regard.
Absolutely. And, one thing I really appreciated about the format of this, as you said, with the way that these opened up, is that it is like coming home, I guess you could say, because ever since we were introduced to Keeve in the comics, she always had those little green boxes of the aside thoughts that she was having. And, when she was much younger, it was always about her inner voice and, oh my gosh, like, why did you say that? And why did you do that? And it's kind of that way again, but in a very melancholy and even, you know, kind of depressing way because the fact that she has lost Skier. And so, but it's still harkening back to that very first kind of image that we ever got of her. And it's still staying true to that in the storytelling. And I just really appreciated that.
Yeah. So, the first one is her imagining and remembering what it was like at the fall of Starlight Beacon and what Skier must have been going through. He had that disease, which was kind of taking his sanity, his sentience. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but
His
basically his ability,
skeerness. Yeah.
yeah,
His whole
away from him.
skeerness.
And it was interfering with his connection to the Force, which is what
Yeah.
allowed him to fight the Nameless because he wasn't drawing on the Force at the time. The second one I absolutely adore that starts issue 2, and she's reflecting on her Padawan trials, not to be convinced with her Jedi Knight trials. And she's sparring with someone, and she has a really bad moment and ends up swearing a lot. And then, she's like, I'm not, one of the Jedi there says, are you ready? And she's like, obviously I'm not ready. Did you just see what happened? And she just starts to rant. And all of a sudden Skier blurts out, by the will of Force, I, Master Skier, take you, Padawan. Keeve Trennis is my Padawan. And she's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Such a classic Keeve moment. And then, he's got this very fearsome looking face and he cracks a smile. And then she cracks
Mhm.
one in return. And it just steals your heart. That was such an awesome, awesome moment.
Oh, absolutely, and just the fact that it was conveyed through panels of a comic book
Hmm.
just makes it all the better.
Yeah. And then, we get the follow up to that one is that, she, as Skee's Padawan, is helping him battle a fire on what they call a Trago in the Triton system. And Skier, of course, has got the scales and he's very fire resistant in that way as a Trandoshan. And he's holding the fire back, but then he notices a calf that's been trapped. And so he has Keeve do it. And she's got that moment of self doubt. And he's like, I wouldn't tell you to do it if you couldn't do it.
Mhm.
And so it's like that confidence building moment. And,
Right.
you know, it's one of those things, there's only so much space in these comic books. We knew how much Skier meant to her, but we didn't get an opportunity to get all these back moments there. And
Mhm.
so it now just added so much weight to the end of the Marvel run from phase 1 when they had to say goodbye to each other.
Oh, definitely, and it just really adds a lot of depth to their relationship because we knew that they were close to begin with, as master and Padawan, but just these little moments that they shared and just what Skier said, no one gets left behind. And
Mhm.
that comes back. And that also kind of haunts Keeve as well, just having him say that.
Mhm. Indeed. Okay. So as I mentioned off the top, a lot of this has to do with what's going on with the Hutts. And so they get a transmission from Elzar Mann. It was cool to see him in the comics. He
Mhm.
hasn't had a lot of comic book time in the main Marvel run that Kevin Scott's been writing.
They're doing
And
great.
they find out that the Hutts, particularly under the leadership of Scarabda, is that how
Mhm.
you were pronouncing it? That's how I was
That's
pronouncing it.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
did, yep.
Are meeting with the Nile. And so they're afraid that there's going to be an alliance formed between the two of them. So the Geos, named Dr. Stellan Geos, which is where Keeve
Yeah.
Trennis is stationed on, is under the Commander Jahin, are sent there to deal with this. And they show up at this planet Balaam, which is in Hut occupied space. And the Nile, led by someone named Masakine, are offering up weapons, ships, droids to the Hutts, and in an attempt to encourage this alliance. And so they arrive, they attack, and we get this character, which they refer to as a child of the Nile. This one's specifically called Lycos. But talk about your bizarre character. This guy had like
Yeah.
a vine tentacle arm and is kind of an enforcer for the Nile. What'd you make of this one?
Well, I wondered if it was just sort of a prosthetic kind of a
Mhm.
thing, or if it was really this particular type of species of being that has this crazy vine, but obviously using it as a weapon.
Yeah, I was reminded of the Dringir in this. Back in phase
Ah,
1,
yeah, good call.
after Skier lost his arm, he kind of had that I don't know what to call it, but like that linked up with the Dringir, and he had that arm that grew back that was
Mhm.
like vines from the Dringir. And so I didn't know if it had anything to do with that or not.
Oh,
But
yeah.
not only that, the Nile brought a nameless with them
Mhm.
to this planet, and Keeve and this other Jedi named Santar end up in some serious trouble before Tarek flies his fighter down there and just bombards it with blaster fire, kills it, and ends up saving Keeve's life. Santar's not so lucky. He got petrified.
Right. Yeah, and we get to see that in firsthand here in the comic, and Keeve is very, very troubled by that, and she almost loses herself in the process because she
Mhm.
didn't want Xantar to leave her like Skier did, and so it was kind of a really bad deja vu for her at that point. But thankfully, like you said, Tarek was able to like bombard and work around that.
Right. And so we kind of a little bit of a cliffhanger about whether or not Terex
Yes.
survived that. But we get the big twist. There is an enforcer for the Hutts that is doing a lot of damage in the battle that's going on there in Balaam. And all of a sudden the Ataraxia arrives. And if that name doesn't sound familiar, let me refresh your memory. That was Avar Chris's ship that she was using to fight the Nile that was stolen by Lorna D at the end of phase one. And then the enforcer reveals herself to be none other than Lorna D. So, you and I had been a little bit spoiled because we were just talking about the audio drama not too long
Mhm.
ago that's coming up. And we knew Lorna was going to be working with Keeve Trennis and Avar Chris and all this. So, but that being said, I did not put two and two together up until the reveal that that enforcer was Lorna. But how about you?
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah, and it's always so great to see Lorna D. She always makes such an amazing entrance no matter what. And I loved it at the end where, they were calling it the ataraxia, and she's like, "Nope, not the ataraxia. Can you guess what I called the ship?" Well, of course,
Yeah.
it's the Lorna D.
It's like the Lorna D 3 or 4 at this
Yeah.
point because she's had so many of them.
3.0, 4.0. Yeah, exactly.
And she always renames her ships after herself.
Mhm.
Okay, so we get into issue 2, and this is really a cool episode. So we got a lot of things that are going on. You got Masakine attempting to probe Keeve's mind, basically find out what the Jedi are up to and why are there. And then I love Keeve for this moment. She just turns everything back on them. She's like, "You don't have to do this. I'll just tell you. We're here to
Yes.
take back the planet that you all invaded. It's not yours." And then there's this revelation that Skarbada is the sister of Myarga, the Hutt, who was killed in phase one by Lorna D. But this is not
Mhm.
common knowledge. And Skarbada says something along the lines like, "Hey, let Keeve talk. I would like to meet the Jedi who was there when my dear sister died." And before Keeve can blurt out that it was actually Lorna D that did the D, Lorna has her shocked. Like, I
Mhm.
can't remember what that little, talk about your tension there. Some fun twists that were going on.
Yeah, and it was cool to see the little flashback in the panels with Myarga and the basically the little battle skiff that she was on, and then the Rancor, and all of
Mhm.
those kinds of things. But yeah, it was funny in a way because it was like, they took away the fun when Keeve says, "I'll just tell you, what you need to know."
Yeah. And so we also get the reveal that Tarek didn't die. He survived the crash. And so he's part of the battle that's going on there on the surface. And meanwhile, in the battle going up above, Sarah is fighting Lorna's ship, and a Hutt fighter nearly gets him before he is saved by another Jedi named Adan Yaluk. I don't know this, and I did not get an opportunity to look it up, but I am guessing this Adan Yaluk is actually a tribute to probably someone named Aiden Cooley.
Huh. Yeah, that sounds
Um,
about right.
because I'm just looking at that name like, I don't know. I'm looking it up as we talk because
There you go.
it's just it just struck me as, yeah, I don't know. It seems like that has to be a tribute to somebody because that that's Luke. Where does that come from? That looks just like Cooley backwards. I don't know. But did you have any
Mhm,
thoughts?
kinda like Matt Martin and Mart Matten, when
Yeah.
the little alliteration kind of a thing. I mean, yes, we've seen all kinds of diverse types of spellings and Jedi names and whatnot, but that does seem a little too on the nose. But, one thing about Sarah in this particular portion of the comic that I thought was really well done was just the fact that when he's pictured in his starfighter fighting Lorna's ship, you see his reflection in the window, and he's kind of, still worried about Tarek because we still don't know if Tarek actually survived or not.
Mhm.
And so I just thought that was a really cool touch that they were showing the reflection as sort of a parallel to their mind meld. You know what I mean? Their ability
Yeah.
to be mind twins.
And now that we're talking about them, Tarek and Sarah, they nearly got devoured by the Nameless back in phase 1. They
Mhm.
survived that, but now they're having an issue where they used to be in sync, simpatico, if you will, back in the day. At one point in this story, Lorna points out, you have these bonded twins that can barely stand to be in the same room together, and we see that tension come up over and over
Yeah.
again.
Mhm.
And they disagree with what some of the others are doing. At one point, I believe it's Sarah is trying to use a Jedi mind trick on Lorna to find out about what's going on with the Nile. And he's really getting forceful with this, and Keeve comes in and tackles him, and Tarek is just like, when Sarah says, we, like they commonly do when they're talking, because they share the same mind. Tarek's like, don't you use we here? I want no part of that.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I
And
know.
so
I was taken a little back by that actually.
yeah, and even Lorna, points this out, that there's an
Mhm.
issue going on between them. So I'm really curious how that one gets resolved.
Yeah, me too. And of course, that's, as you said, due to the Nameless and basically the devastation that the Nameless had on the brains.
hmm So all these revelations and the fact that Lorna D almost nearly kills Scarabda basically causes at least a temporary alliance between the Hutts and the Republic against the Nile. And so Lorna D is trying to make her escape. And then as they're leaving, Lycos gets shot, but he is claiming that the injuries and stuff that happened to him were not a result of anything that Isle did themselves, but there was this Jedi monster wandering around the occlusion zone that, and a Trandoshan, no less, that injured him. Well, this captures Keeve's attention right away that,
Mhm.
whoa, wait a minute, somehow did Skier survive?
Right.
So I remember at phase 1's conclusion, there was that heartfelt goodbye between Keeve and Skier, and I really felt like that was it. So how
Mhm.
surprised are you, if at all, that Skier has survived the destruction of Starlight Beacon?
I am actually very surprised, and I don't know how you feel about all of these reappearances of these characters that were thought to be dead. And not to say that, oh, they should just stay dead, but we got Buryaga back, which was great. And now
Mhm.
we've got Skier back, which, okay, this is great. But, in some ways, it's kind of like, you know, does it lessen the tragedy of the first time around? You know what I mean? Like, can they just stay dead? That sounds awful, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, death no longer has any meaning if
Right.
people
Yes,
keep
yes,
coming
yes.
back, is what
Exactly.
happens here. And so it's always great to get a character back that you thought you lost. But if it lessens the tension going forward, it's like when Tarek died, in quotes, in the first issue here, when he crashed, I wasn't too worried about it because, Sarah seemed to be a little bit of shock, but the next episode is like, he makes mention of Tarek is doing whatever. And, since they were bonded, he knew Tarek hadn't perished and stuff like that. So that one, no big deal, no harm, no foul. But, we lost Stellan Geos, and we lost the Wayseeker, and we lost, Orbelin, who comes back. We lost a number
Right.
of Jedi, and those deaths were promoted as being, no one is safe when it comes down to it. And we were left all this time to wonder about Buryaga because that one wasn't clear, and they'd been teasing us that he might not be dead.
Oh, yeah.
But they
Yeah.
left all these others alone. They weren't really teasing us about any of those type of things. And so, yeah, it's one thing if one or two comes back, but the volume that we're getting here of people who survived that were otherwise, believed to be killed in action. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go to that step and kill someone, then don't necessarily cheapen it by bringing them back so easily later. Now,
Yeah.
some of them make sense because we get Archivist Oberlin, who is essentially a blob that puts himself in a suit and takes the shape of a humanoid.
Mhm.
And he quote unquote died when Lorna D shot him through the head. Well, his brains aren't in his head,
Mhm.
so that wasn't a lethal blow to begin with, and that makes sense. But I'll be disappointed if some of the other characters that we've mourned their lossing all of a sudden show up again.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say. You go through that, you get invested, and then they're taken away, and then you kind of go through that grief process, so to speak. And then you're okay with it. And then it's like, oh, but wait, here they are. And I'm not saying that it's not great to have Skier back. And if it's I think that I mean the writing on this has always been amazing because Cavan Scott is just a master writer. I mean,
Uh-huh.
as far as storyteller goes and the way that he's been able to craft all of these tales. But I have a little trepidation about a lot of these characters coming back. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say he's probably my favorite writer for the High Republic
Oh, for
between what
sure.
he's done in
Yeah.
the books and what he's done with the comics and the audio dramas as well. And so, I'm not going to knock it so much. And what he's got going for him is the way these characters survive is credible. It's not like a retcon where we had to make up some sort of miraculous escape. In this case, and now we're drifting across all 4 episodes or issues of this series, so I'm not going to go issue pretend to go issue by issue anymore.
Hmm.
But the story is that a bunch of them got into an escape pods and they left, but then the storm wall went up and they were caught behind the wall. And
Hmm.
so after the things with the Nile and the huts are dealt with, basically Keeve, Tarek, and Sarek commandeer the Ataraxia because it's been outfitted with a path drive, and they take it into the occlusion zone so they can track down uh, Skier. And Sarek attempts to use this Jedi mind trick, which doesn't work until he's practically torturing Lorna D. And then they get on the computers and they find reports of some sort of a Jedi attacking people, this Jedi monster attacking people. And that's where they decide to go. I think it's on the planet Kindosorn, which I don't believe we've seen before.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. I think
Mhm.
it's worth noting too about the living prisoners on the cargo
Yeah.
containers that were basically dumped by Lorna before she tries to jump to hyperspace. And so the one thing that they point out though was at least they were retrofitted with life support systems. So Lorna had somewhat of a heart.
Mhm. So let's talk about Lorna for a second. We get her back. We knew we were getting her back, but how excited were you for that?
Oh yeah, I love Lorna D. She's one of those, deliciously evil kind of characters, but
Mhm.
she's got a very cool backstory with the way that she was, essentially trafficked and then kind of went into this life of crime. And so, her layers of her character are really cool. And I just always appreciate seeing her in action.
Yeah, she's like bottled violence.
Oh yeah, that's a good way
She
to put it.
she has these moments where she just kind of takes it, and then she explodes. Someone shatters
Mhm.
the bottle and she's all over the place. And I liked the character when we first met her back in Light of the Jedi that Charles Soule wrote, but she wasn't anything particularly special to me or high on my list. But it was the Tempest Runner audio drama that Cavan Scott wrote
Definitely.
that really put her over the edge for me, gave her that background you're talking about.
Mhm.
So now she's got that prosthetic hand because Ava Chris took off the one that she
Right.
had at the end of phase 1 on Starlight Beacon. And so getting to see her come back and then to hold her own against Keeve Trennis has been pretty cool.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, but she's been taken along as a prisoner to kind of help them navigate Nile space. And, it's a situation where she has no love for Marchion Ro.
Mm-mm.
And I think she kind of considers them rivals in a way
Oh, yeah.
because, I think Cave says something, oh, did Marchion Ro teach you that? She's like, no, I taught him. Uh,
Right, exactly.
yeah. So she's not conceding for 1 second that he's got anything on her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
So,
so cool.
yeah, these issues go by fast when it
They
comes down to it. There's
do.
a lot of cool things that happen. Eve, it's hard to like spit these names out because they're not all that different. Skeeve, Keeve,
Mhm.
Skier, Key. See, I'm already messing them up. Skier, Keeve, Avar, and things like that, and have to stop and think. But she goes into the spacesuit and leaves Ataraxia to fight off the scav droids while they're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what to do about them. Was kind of a Ahsoka in space fighting off the fighters at Peridia type of a thing, which was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
cool as
Good
well. So
call.
I like that as well. Any other moments from the 4 issues stand out to you?
Well, I pointed out a lot of them already, but just the fact that we get to see Keeve continue to kind of grow as a character, and I,
Uh-huh.
I appreciate the continuing kind of common thread that we see not only within the comics themselves, but just the fact of being able to be that connective tissue with the other parts of the media that we've looked at with the novels and the other comics and basically.
Yeah.
So they really do fit together nicely and very seamlessly, but yet you don't have to have one to appreciate the other, which I think is great.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the only thing I'd point out is just like, the conclusion of these 4 issues is Key finding Skier at the heart of those
Yes.
ruins. And,
Mhm.
he's like wearing tatters of his robes and he's very savage and
Yeah,
feral looking at the time. So I
very
can't wait to get issue
Hulk-like.
5 and see what happens after that. So
Yeah, he looks pretty intense.
yeah, but we'll break down the next 4 after they've come out. We've had a chance to digest them. But yeah, this was so good to get back.
Oh, yeah.
This story is great. Kevin Scott's on top of his game. Highly recommend this.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, well then, thank you all for joining for us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the High Republic 1 through 4 by Kevin Scott. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if so, make sure to subscribe to Podcast Stardust on your podcaster of choice. I'd like to remind you can find the entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, which is home to the entire RetroZap podcast network. So you've got Enjoy Stuff, Animaniacast, Doomcast is back, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, and a couple others are around as well. So lots to enjoy over there. And as always, we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings reviews on podcatchers that support such things, such as Apple Podcasts. And we'd love it if you could share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. It's a great way to help us grow. And so speaking of that, Jay, remind everybody what our social media contacts are one more time.
You got it. As always, we can be very easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And Spotify is also an amazing way to share out the show, too. I know there's been a lot of people that have added us to their playlists, and we certainly do appreciate that. We also have our Pinterest boards and our 2 different types of YouTube channels. So we have the regular YouTube as well as YouTube Music, and you can like and subscribe to both of those. And there's some other ways to get in touch with us, and one of those happens to be on Discord. And if you'd like to do some real time chatter with us in our Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server, just head to the link in our show notes and boom, you are there. Even better than hyperspace. And then we also have a T Public store, and we have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of merch. And once again, that link is also in our show notes, and you can help us out with a purchase there. You can also help us out with a purchase through Saber Masters. So if you are in need of a lightsaber or 2, we definitely recommend these really high quality lightsabers from Saber Master. Right now, there is a 2-for-1 deal going on their Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0. You can get 2 for $199. And if you put our code Stardust in at checkout, you can get an extra $10 off of your total sale. So that's at sabermasters.com. And once again, that link is also in our show notes. So speaking of shows, lots of shows. You have a show coming up very soon. So tell us all about it, Dennis.
Right. So my wife and I are talking Star Trek on Warp Trails, which is a podcast exclusive to the RetroZap podcast network feed. And you can also find us on retrozap.com on the Warp Trails page. So if you're interested in Star Trek, especially with the return of season 5 of Star Trek Discovery, then check that out. You can also check out our back catalog. Best place to do that is on the website, where we're talking about previous seasons of Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Picard. Jay, you got a lot going on cosplay, so give us the lowdown.
Oh, yeah. So over on my Instagram is the easiest way to keep track of all of my whereabouts, which is at j.snips cosplay. So April's going to be a really big month for me. I'm going to be starting out in North Olmsted, Ohio for the Fan Expo Cleveland cosplay crunch time. And so the best way to get involved with that is to go onto Instagram and go to my uh, bio, and there will be a link in there to World Gone Geek, and you can register for that. And then I've also got Fan Expo Cleveland coming up, as well as a couple other cons in both Hartville and Worcester, Ohio. So yeah, April's going to be huge, but very busy working on that original concept Mandalorian. It's going great. So check out all my work in progress and everything else that I'm up to over on J.Snips Cosplay.
All right, upcoming on the show, Friday will be our next discussion of The Bad Batch. And on Monday, we'll be getting into some Star Wars news. This is all tentative because we have some things coming up. So we might get switched around, but we'll see. That's our plan. All right. But with that said, thanks for listening to episode 708 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.